Happy Friday, everybody. I'm Shara Rosenbalm, and my talk is centered around crushing constraints as a designer of color. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh,
Yep, you're good.
perfect. Okay, I was getting an echo from the other tab. Alrighty, so just really quick, one second. There we go. So, in the illustrious words of Jay Z, you could have been anywhere in the world right now, but you're here late on a Friday. I don't know about you guys, but I've had a week, so I just appreciate you guys who all is here taking the time to join and listen, and hopefully you guys feel um, energized and fulfilled, like coming out of this talk and going to the next. I have to say that was a hard act to follow. It was an excellent presentation. And so, I assume that if you have joined or you're here for this particular talk, that you're at some sort of crossroads in your journey, but we're going to get into all of that in just a moment. So just really quick, I'm Shara, as was said. I'm senior digital product designer at Dialexa. And just a little bit of background about me. I've got 14 years of experience in design. I'm a wife and mom of 3 girls. And a couple of my favorite things are true crime and 2 chains. And I love dark chocolate. So these are all things that make me really, really happy. But I also just wanted to take a minute to speak to the reason that I'm here. And I feel like the people that you're seeing here really just made this talk possible. So, I mean, I'm married to my best friend, my husband, Ryan. He really did help me get to where I am. He just literally just fielding all of the crazy things that happen, when you're working remotely, juggling kids of all different ages, and so on and so forth. But uh, another piece to that puzzle are my 3 little queens in the making, my daughters. These are Brielle, Reagan, and Mariah. And I really want a lot for them as they grow up as Black young women in a world that is definitely going to pose a lot of challenges for them. And so I just wanted to take a minute to speak to that. So let you guys know what a little bit of my motivation is behind why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so I'm curious. I have hypotheses about why you might be interested in having this conversation with me today. And so there's going to be there's lots of ways or reasons uh, that may come up, but here are a few that I suspect to be the case. This might be you. I'm so frustrated. I'm tired of giving so much to my role, but I can't seem to move up or move forward. So drop in the chat. I can't see the chat, but please drop in the chat if you can relate to this comment. Here's another one. I have such a passion for fill in the blank, whatever that thing is. It could be fine arts. It could be getting into video editing. It could be something completely unrelated to the arts or design, but you just feel like that thing is out of reach. Oh, skipped ahead one. So this could be you too. I'm not feeling my career right now. At the end of the day, just something is missing for me. How many of you feel that way right now about where you are in your career? And if that's you, put it in the chat. This is a safe space, as Tim said. And here's another. Things at work are cool, but if I'm being honest or keeping it 100, I don't always feel valued. And the way when I say valued, that might not necessarily mean, in a monetary way. It could be in terms of recognition as well. So I'm just curious, who here has said that? I really would love to know. Um, so with that, I'm going to dive into a bit of a story. And so, once upon a time, there was a designer full of dreams, hoping to make their mark on history. Every day they worked really hard, kept their head down, and hoped to get promotions, hoped to get that pay increase, and take advantage of leadership opportunities. And then one day they realized that there was no path forward, at the job that they were in. So they moved on to the next thing. And eventually they realized that their only chance to move up was to move on. So they moved on again and again and again. But because of that, they thought that they'd be happy for a little bit, but it didn't last. It didn't last very long. And until finally they came to the realization that something was really missing for them. They didn't have the growth that they wanted, and they just simply felt stuck. So if you haven't figured that out, that's really where the majority of my time in my design career I was spent in that space. And so ultimately what I came to realize was that nothing changes if nothing changes. I had some really hard questions to answer, and I wasn't sure where to really find those answers. But I finally did get there, and I had to answer a few questions for myself, and they were, why do I feel so unfulfilled? Why do I always have to change a job to get anywhere, to get the next title, or to get that pay increase that I'm looking for? And I also had to answer this other question, which was, what kind of work do I want to do that makes me feel like I'm doing something that's of value? And so I just wanted to share with you guys kind of like a high level of my journey so far. And so, I started with my first design internship, which led to a full-time opportunity. Uh, in that process, I secured my master's degree. I finally left that job. I moved on to another job, and you'll see another job, and finally kind of leading you into where I am today, which is a senior product designer at Alexa. But what I really want to speak to was just that point where things finally changed. And so finally, like 2019, I just decided things have to be different. I knew that I had to change the way that I thought about myself. I had to change the way that I behaved in order to really see fruitful and lasting change professionally. And so, anyway, not to make this whole talk about me and my own journey or experiences, but I really wanted to get to kind of like the core of what it is that makes sense for those of us who are of color and really looking to, move the needle forward professionally. And so what I would love to have you all walk away with today is to be able to kind of dig into those questions that you have that are kind of simmering under the surface. And it took me a really long time to even figure out what those questions were personally, but I would love for you all to be able to, align to the motive that you have for yourself, those driving forces, to be able to tune into that and determine, okay, now I know what the core problem is, and then follow through with, okay, well, what's the plan? If we don't like this, I don't love how I feel right now, or I'm yearning for something different, how do I move forward? And so being able to come away with this and feeling like you have some actionable steps to craft a plan to get the things moving forward in the way that you'd like. And lastly, most importantly, I want you all to feel empowered as you come away with this and feel like you can go to work or start fresh next week and start applying some of the things that you're going to walk away with today. All right, so first, I would love it if we could talk about the workplace, and we're going to look at it as a social system. And so I came across this quote, and it really resonated with me. The quote is, a job is often regarded as an economic transaction, but the brain experiences the workplace first and foremost as a social system. And so when I read this, I had like the mind blown emoji that went off. I had that sort of reaction, like, wow, it really is like that. And so it also made me think of this, that I think of a high school cafeteria when you're watching a movie and they just show you all of the different groups and communities and how all of these things come together as a whole, but you have these individual characters that you're also following as well. And so, anyway, thought that a little humor to share here. So, if we're defining a social system, it's the patterned series of interconnected relationships that exist between individuals, groups, and institutions, and it forms a coherent whole. And so, if we take what he said, what David Rock said in that quote, and we look at work in this format or in this structure, we can begin to kind of frame what those constraints that we might face within a social system, what they might be. But first, let's define constraints. Constraints are the state of being checked, restricted, or compelled to avoid or perform a certain action. And so, if we understand the meaning of a social system and we understand the meaning of constraints, let's think about what those constraints might be or how they might manifest in the workplace. And so they're going to show themselves in a variety of ways. So if we're looking at the social system, individually, we're going to place plenty of constraints on ourselves in terms of what we think we can or cannot do. But we're going to get to that later. But in the immediate term, we could be looking at, a lack of financial resources to invest in some professional development, and that could be a class or course or a certification of some sort. It could be, a lack of diversity within our teams and within our departments, our company overall. If you are in the product design or the UX space, then you know very well that it's incumbent upon us to have diverse teams designing products, because if everyone is the same that builds the thing, you're going to miss out on key user groups and key experiences that can inform those designs and make it truly inclusive, which is what we need more of in this world. And so constraints can also manifest themselves in the form of company politics or a weak company culture as well. And that even trickles down to a team as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be, the whole company that embodies some of these behaviors. This could be team centric too. And so a few other things that are here, company policies that maybe primarily benefit the majority. And that could be around, what type of hairstyles you're allowed to have, or how it may manifest that you reflect your culture or in an outward expression of some sort. It could also be a lack of safety and representation, just in general among leadership, and in many other facets. So, but on that last bullet, let's just kind of look at the representation or the progression of representation of people of color in the tech space. And I'm also going to touch on gender here as well. And so this is an excerpt from a report that Blender put out just earlier this year. And so they're comparing the progression or the change, gender and race throughout the tech industry from 2014 to 2021. And we've seen the most growth and the increase of the Asian population in tech, which is great. However, if you look at everything else, they have moved very, very little. And of course, we have the leadership breakdown for people of color in tech and women. It doesn't look much better. 49% fewer Asian executives. We have 21% less total compensation for female named executive officers. And then we have 0% of Black women named executive officers, who are the 5 highest paid execs in an organization or a publicly traded company. And so I wanted to call out the fact too that in terms of the trans and LGBTQ community in tech, there is not a lot of information. So it was very difficult to find even just this to share with you guys today. But I thought it was interesting that if you'll notice that the darker bar at the top is representative of just kind of the general crowd and what have you. And so, but in every case, those numbers are higher than what the actual LGBTQ or transgender communities felt within this workplace in particular, or through this particular survey. There is a lot of work that needs to be done to create safety for these communities so that we can get the data that we need and understand how we can better support them and not only ourselves throughout this transition that's hopefully going to continue to evolve and be ongoing. And I just also want to be clear in saying that everyone's workplace experience is different. And so if you identify with one or more of any of these groups, you may have had a range of experiences, uh, being marginalized or just as part of different organizations and throughout different stages of your life and career. And it's important to note too that perception and bias are present throughout the social system that we're calling work. And so if that isn't a constraint, I don't know what is. And but before we start trying to make bigger changes within this social system that we're a part of, we need to be looking at how we address or behave ourselves within this social system and how we can influence that change gradually. And so that will create ripples um, based on our behavior and approach. And so again, this information that I just shared, it's not new. It's commonplace to shame the devil or finger wag at these companies. Like they need to do better. They need to do this. And we can tell them what they're doing wrong, but that's not necessarily the objective of the chat here. We just want to acknowledge the fact that we understand that there are a lot of things that are beyond our control, but we're going to shift focus onto what's within our realm of influence. So crushing our constraints. And I say crushing our constraints because we're going to look inward. And so each of us are at the core. And in that core, we have plenty of influence with what we can do within ourselves. And it's as much or as little as we choose to exercise. And so take it to full capacity. We have to be cognizant of the constraints that we are putting on ourselves within this greater system. And so earlier, we defined constraints as the state of being checked, restricted, or compelled to avoid or perform some action. But we're going to redefine constraints when we're talking about it in context of ourselves. An alternative definition is the repression of one's own feelings, behavior, or actions. I was like, this hits different, doesn't it? When you change the meaning of constraints, or not change it necessarily, you just look at it a different way. How many of you does this resonate with? This definitely hits home for me, especially as I read it. It just resurfaced a whole lot of feelings for me. And so I'm going to be vulnerable with you for a moment. I'm going to get tuned into Brene Brown, and I'm going to share with you some of those thoughts that I've had across the first 13 years of my professional career. And that's, if I keep my head down, if I do good work, and I don't make waves, I'm going to get promoted. It has to happen. It will happen that way. That is so not how this works. So not how this works. But we will get to that. One of the other thoughts I had was, writing a book and speaking out would be, everything to me. But I don't have anything to offer. I'm just not qualified for this. And another one I thought many times is that when I reflect on my career, my heart just sinks. The work that I didn't wasn't fulfilling for me. It didn't feel like it mattered much. And I thought I was just there to really be an extra set of hands. And I was like a glorified production artist. I have no shade to any production artist or anyone who started there. But I just felt, I just didn't get the feeling that what I was doing hit hard or had a great impact anywhere. And lastly, this was something I often would say. I said, look, I'm just happy to have a job. I'm not going to complain or raise my hand about, hey, how can I get more money or how can I do, get this or that. My whole motto was just be grateful and be quiet. And so, again, I think we all know that that's not necessarily the way to move. And maybe some of you don't know that. But I wish that I knew way earlier what I know now. And so part of the reason I feel that some monumental moves have been able to be made, at least in my space, were due to just a simple way of looking at changes. Making lasting changes is dependent upon the approach to that change. And so in the book Leadership on the Line, the authors discuss people's general response to change. And so there's two types. You have technical versus adaptive. And so here are the differences between the two. Technical change can be characterized by like a simple fix, just something you just by default know how to do. And so adaptive change is a little bit deeper than technical change. It requires experimentation, it requires discovery, adjustments, and it's done typically within an organization or community. But in this case, I applied it to the way I wanted to address my career. So previously, my technical change would have been, I'm just going to change jobs. I don't like this job anymore. I don't like the work I'm doing. I'm just going to change jobs. And the reason I continued to just change jobs was because I was solving the problem temporarily. It was a technical change to an adaptive challenge. And so taking on adaptive change in this space looks a little bit different. And so kind of peeling back the layers on that. Adaptive changes that can be made throughout your career, if you are relating to anything that you're hearing now, those adaptive changes, are really based on these four core areas: self-awareness, self-advocacy, managing up, and assessing your value. So do you remember those statements at the very, very, very beginning? It's what took me 4 years to figure out. It took me 4 years to figure out the why behind those statements. And so some questions that I would challenge you to ask yourself are, what types of work give me energy? What takes my energy? What is missing from my work? How do I want to be recognized? And what matters to me the most? And those are huge. Once you can unpack the answers to those questions, then it'll really help you begin to move the needle forward. So here are a few ways that you can tune into your self-awareness. So no cap, the Enneagram is the best thing ever. It is fire. I love it. I love it so much. And so I'm called the Enneagram Queen at work because I'm always the first one to bring it up or ask someone when I meet them, what is your Enneagram number? And then I'll begin to confirm my understanding of how they see the world. And so if you're not familiar with Enneagram, it is a system of personality typing that describes how people interpret the world and how they manage their emotions. But it also tunes into how they manage their emotions and how they behave in growth and how they behave in stress. And so I'm a new manager now. So I've got a couple of direct reports. And so that was one of the first things I tried to find out about them is, how do you, deal with, your growth and your stress? And two, this has really helped me understand why I do the things that I do. And I can look back on situations and like, okay, I see what happened there. And so it's a great way. It has a scale of healthy behaviors, average and unhealthy behaviors that so you can kind of see where you are. I love that it also offers actionable steps that you can take to improve and exhibit more healthy attributes. And it's also dynamic. I think so, and more in comparison to kind of like the Myers-Briggs or some of those other frameworks that are out there. So collecting objective feedback, that this is critical. My first piece of advice is don't ask your mom unless you have my mom, because my mom is very direct and she does not hold her tongue. And if I'm wrong, she lets me know about it. But to be serious, engaging people across all levels and teams and getting a sense of their perception of you, how you communicate, how you present, provide feedback, what your written skills are like, how you collaborate, how you execute, and then any areas of growth or any areas of unrealized strengths or leadership that you have. These are key things that are going to help you tune into, who you are holistically, and not just your own opinion with your judge that's in your mind, your subconscious, who's constantly giving you a whole very different narrative, I'm sure. But the most important thing to remember here is that perception is reality. So if people are telling you they see you a certain way, then that's their reality. And if that doesn't align to how you see yourself or how you'd like to be seen, then you have to work on that. And so that's why self-awareness is so important. Um, and I also want to speak to the fact that this isn't necessarily self-awareness in general isn't necessarily a tool to say, well, I know myself. I get myself. This is it. It's not me. It's them. It's everyone else. It's not an excuse to do that. It's especially important to do the work and to really look at yourself and say, okay, I need to do better. I have opportunity here for improvement. Um, and so lastly, just some mindfulness exercises. As I mentioned earlier, it took me 4 years to answer some of those questions. And the best part of that was, it turned out that it was I was in a mindful space. I was on maternity leave with my youngest daughter, and just having to be still and having that space to really think about what's going on or what I didn't necessarily like or feel good about in my career. It was great. So it ended up being kind of like a mindful exercise, but that can take the form of meditation. It could be energy mapping. You could do bullet journaling. You can UX it really. If you wanted to, you could really dig into some of some design research tools and design thinking methods, and really kind of get into why I'm feeling this way at certain times, or when I'm getting asked to do certain tasks. And then you can find the trends. You can go back and synthesize that and use that information to your advantage. All right, self-advocacy. So I often think about, my favorite musicians who, maybe in my opinion are underrated, or, they even think they're underrated. And I can listen to some of their songs and I'm like, man, nobody else is gonna hypes them up as much as they do. But they have a fan base, of course. But I just feel like we should approach self-advocacy with that same energy. Not out of ego or anything like that, but just really believing what you say about yourself. Like I really am a good designer. I would never say that before. Even just saying that now made me feel uncomfortable. But it's a work in progress, guys. It's gradual. And so anyway, I loved this quote because no one is going to stand up for you better than you. And so you've got to be able to talk to that. Why you deserve certain things when those times come up, or why you deserve certain opportunities. And like I said, it still makes me uncomfortable, but I'm powering through that. And I definitely feel that it's made a huge difference. But at the end of the day, like, no one's going to hype you up better than you. So enlist sponsors. And so I want to be clear and speak to the fact that sponsors are different from mentors. They should be 2 levels above you, and they should be in the room when those key conversations are happening. And so those key conversations may be promotions or new projects, opportunities. that are coming in the door, or future vision work. You want someone at several sponsors if you can get them throughout your organization, and you may already have them and not realize it. And this is also why it's important to socialize with people um, throughout your departments and beyond. Share your interest with them. Get to know theirs as well, and what they specialize in. What are they a subject matter expert in? And then you can tap into that if it aligns with your career objectives once you've outlined those. And so, for example, at Dialexa, I'm learning the sales process, which is far beyond my day-to-day duties. But because I've raised my hand and said, I want to understand this so that I can understand how our business comes in, what role we all play. I've got a principal level design lead sponsoring me, and he is like one of my, besides my manager, I feel like he's my biggest cheerleader. He says, I want to get you to principal in 3 years. And I'm like, I'm with it. Let's do it. And so that's why sponsorship is so important. Just having the courage to raise your hand and express interest in learning things or being a part of different things that you normally wouldn't do uh, beforehand. Um, Another thing, being vocal and being honest about what it is that you want. How can anybody help you if they don't know what it is that you're looking for? Um, and that is a very, very difficult thing for me. It feels counterproductive too, to let people know what you're thinking and what you're after. But for example, I've been on an engagement for, I think I was in 4 months, and at this into a 6 month engagement. I was 4 months in. I told everybody in different one-on-ones, I want to get off this ride. I want to try some other things. And I told them why. I would love to get to a place where I feel like I can lead an engagement. I want to get to a place where I can, support, more junior designers. And it felt counterintuitive, but I was transparent and I was clear about what I wanted. And I was able to get that opportunity just because I spoke up about it. And so again, voicing your goals, um, in doing so, you want to create accomplices out of your peers, not partners, but I say accomplices. You want them to be conspiring with you. Well, how do we get you this opportunity? How can we make this happen? And then lastly, getting involved if there are department, OKRs, whatever framework you all use. If it's beyond your department, if they're around, ERGs, if you've got groups for, Black designers or Black professionals within your organizations, it's important to have that visibility and be involved, because it's easy to just kind of sit back and say, oh, I wish they would do this or do that. But definitely raise your hand and see how you can, insert yourself into those situations, because you never know what you are going to bring to the table that's going to be a huge support for someone else. All right. So managing up. This one is, this one is also can be a tough one for folks. But there should be no surprises between you and your manager when you're talking about your career goals and what the path is. How many of you can say that your manager knows exactly what you want to achieve in the next 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months from now? And so drop that in the chat. Do you guys have that relationship with your manager where, you guys are just really, vibing here and there, and always what the next moves are, and, where you are in relation to your goal. And so they can't be your accomplice if they don't know what the grand plan is, right? I told my manager on day one at Dialexa that I wanted to get to senior. I think I told her my second day. I wanted to get to senior as quickly as possible. And she says, cool, let's do it. And we were able to achieve that. And so the important things here about managing up are really about the relationship. And so your manager is more than their title. They're a human being. So, get to where you're asking them non-work related questions like, what is life teaching you right now? Ask them about what they value, and then ask them what their biggest challenges are at work. And you can even learn what their Enneagram number is. But the point is, like, the core part of creating that relationship is about making them, humanizing them for one thing, and not just looking at them as a means to get to where you want to go. But also, if you're tuning into, what they value and what's important to them, and what their challenges are, you can be working together to maybe ease some of those challenges if you have a influence on that. And then also, if you understand what they value, you can just have checks and balances against all of your activity that you're doing professionally to make sure that those things are in alignment. Not saying change yourself, but I'm definitely saying to be aware of those things. And then, of course, creating a master plan. My manager and I, we like to get together and we visualize my path to the next phase, the next bigger big promotion, or whatever that looks like. And so we'll use a Trello board. We'll put out all the performance criteria, which I hope that all of your organizations or companies have. We map all of those things out, and then using color and labels in Trello, we can kind of see, okay, well, I still need to be able to demonstrate these and these certain competencies. Well, how can we do that? And so we just get really strategic about that. But managing up, owning your one-on-one agendas, and really just speaking to what it is that you want to achieve. I feel like is your way to manage up. And these activities tie back to, really tied to the next piece of this as well. Being able to visualize your value, know your worth, and then add tax. And so it is really hard for us to talk about money, and I don't know why that is. I don't know why. I have very few friends where we actually talk dollar amounts in our salaries or in our compensation packages. But if we don't have that conversation, then how do we know um, how we're valued? And so you need to be able to speak to at the drop of a hat. If you're wanting to have those money conversations, you need to be prepared. Come prepared or don't come at all. So you need to know based on what all you've contributed, how you contribute to your company, the bottom line, the business goals, the department goals, all of it, or to clients if you have clients. Like, you need to be able to tie everything back to, tie your value back to all of those things. And so you need to also know the processes, your company's processes, when the pay increases occur, how often is the promotion cycle, all of those things. Are those things one and the same? Do they only happen at the same time? So you have to know everything through and through before you decide to, if you're going to decide to challenge certain conversations, or, if you want to broach the topic. Another thing is investing, being sure that you're willing to put the dollars or the time in to grow your skill set. I can't harp on that enough. I'm also doing classes, so take it or leave it if it's helpful. But on the low end, lo-fi, there's books and podcasts and virtual meetups, one-on-ones with people in your organization, taking advantage of mentorship. And there's also a high end too. There's investing in certifications, courses, another degree if you're ambitious like that. Um, and hiring a coach, which is something that I've personally invested in, and I've definitely felt that I've reaped the rewards. And so if you're making the case for the company to kind of sponsor some of these things, you can put that together, take it upon yourself to put that together, work with your manager to do that, and then tie the outcomes back to, this is how this will help us meet company objectives. Commit to being the subject matter expert on the topic, whatever the thing is. Find those ways to garner that investment, either from the company or just take the leap and do it yourself, and take advantage and fully immerse yourself in it. And then lastly, how many of you wait until it's performance review time to document your performance over the last 6 months or a year, or whatever the cadence is? Put that in the chat. I would love to see that when I can see all of the discussion that's happening. If you're waiting to do that, that is too late. And so back to that previous slide and talking about how you're managing up and all of those things, it's very important to be able to point to these very specific instances where you've provided X value tied to X OKR or key company objective, whatever the things are. It is crucial to have good documentation. So you should be documenting it monthly at least. I document every week because I have 3 kids. I don't know which way is up, and I barely know what day it is. And so I highly recommend capturing some of the key activities and things that you do as regularly as possible. This gives you time to pivot, to tap a colleague, to tap to your manager if you don't think that you're trending towards, hitting a certain objective, or being able to facilitate some connection in order to kind of get things over the line. Um, but you basically want to demonstrate like consistent contributions to the business overall. And so, for example, you could put together a deck that you present to your manager quarterly. Um, about your work, your stuff outside of work, any awards, any talks or presentations you've given, volunteer work, all of it. And by the time performance review, comes around, you can ask, hey, do you want to have a meeting or talk about this? And they can say, well, why? I already know all the things that you're doing. It just really depends on, your manager and the relationship that you all have. And then the cadence that all of these things happen with. But documentation is key, in my opinion. And so lastly, some of you may be thinking, Shara, this all sounds great, wonderful, and fluffies and rainbows and all of that. Your company sounds great. But what if I don't work in a company like that? If you might not, you might work in a place or realize, you know what, I need an exit strategy. And sometimes it is just like that. And so I don't know if you all have ever heard the phrase, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. I mean, I'm a firm believer in that. And so obviously you don't just want to quit your job, but at the end of the day, if you are constantly, whether you love your job or not, like networking is a non-negotiable. You guys need to be on LinkedIn, building that network, connecting with people, reaching out, sending notes, personalized notes, and really getting to know people, because you just never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. And so, again, like I said, if you stay ready, you never have to get ready. Those opportunities will just kind of present themselves to you. And who knows, even if you are happy where you are, the right thing at the right time may appear. And so, just very quickly, I want to just share a few resources. There's just a few of my faves, so I'll leave them up for a second so you can get a screenshot. I skipped one. And so I mentioned, that I've invested in a leadership coach, but I've also been able to take advantage of some of the workshops that the design department has. And I think that they're really well put together, and I've had some great opportunities come about that. Rethink is another one as well. So if you want, grab a quick screenshot. And then, I'm all about self-awareness. And so these are a few of my favorite books that on the topics. And so please grab a screenshot of those as well. But, self-awareness is not like a one and done thing. This is an ongoing, it's iterative, it's cyclical. And so I'm always in favor of just kind of keeping that trend going. And so lastly, I just want to leave you with this quote from Lionel Richie. When you get scared, take a step forward. That will definitely be the linchpin for you in deciding to make these changes, and then the difference between deciding and actually executing. So thank you guys so much for having me. This was wonderful.